In Paris next month to take part in facilitating a two-state solution. This emerged from a meeting between President Jacob Zuma and his Palestinian counterpart Mahmoud Abbas in Pretoria. According to the minister in the presidency, Zuma confirmed South Africa's support for a two-state solution. Palestinian senior negotiator with Israel, Saeb Erekat, says they appreciate South Africa's support. The French initiative will be taking place in Paris on the 3rd of June. The meeting will include ministers of foreign affairs. Now, Jeena is the executive director of the Afro-Middle East Center, AMEC. He joins us now in studio for more on that story. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, the PLO wants South Africa deeply involved in these talks. What are the chances that we can make some sort of difference here?
You started off with a difficult question. Frankly, I don't think much is going to come out of these talks. It's talks with a number of foreign ministers from about 20 countries, including South Africa,
yes,
as well as the EU, United Nations, US, Russia, and the Arab League. But there's very little chance that much will come out of it. The first round of talks on the 3rd of June will not include Palestinians or Israelis. Because the idea is to get the other groups together and other countries together to come out with some kind of a consensus.
Is that sensible, though, to exclude them?
In general, it's a sensible strategy, because then what you do is you come up with an idea without having the two contenders kind of chipping in and interrupting all the time. You have a discussion, you come up with a plan that then in the second meeting gets presented to those two. The issue, of course, is that the Israelis have made it clear they're not going to participate in anything. So the first meeting will take place. The second meeting, which is supposed to include the Israelis and Palestinians, probably won't go ahead because Israelis are not interested. So that's where things stand. So unfortunately, however deeply South Africa might be involved in this meeting, nothing is going to come out of it, I don't think.
So we shouldn't bother to go. What should other countries be doing, because they are hosting this meeting to ensure that something does happen? The Israelis, yes, don't want to take part, but what should we be doing then? Should we just step back and say, well, no one wants to take part anyway, and we should step aside? How does that make us look?
Yeah, no, that doesn't work in diplomacy. Yeah. So if South Africa, after having been invited and after our president meeting with Mahmoud Abbas and him saying, please attend, if we then do not attend, the indication is that we're not interested in the Palestinian-Israeli issue, and we're not interested in supporting the Palestinians, which is what we claim that we do. So we have to attend. We have to participate. There's no other show on the scene at the moment, and so this is the only one that's happening. But your broader question, what should the international community do? I mean, what the international community needs to do in order to find a solution in this context is to ensure that international law is applied on all sides. In particular, that the borders that the United Nations have designated for a Palestinian and an Israeli state, that those borders are adhered to, that the occupation of Palestinian lands ends, that all of the settlements in the West Bank, which are all illegal under international law, that those are dismantled, that the Palestinian refugees are allowed to return. All of this is under international law. What Israel does is it says that, no, despite the fact that this is part of international law, these are things we'll negotiate. So they continue building settlements while they say, no, we want to talk to the Palestinians. But all of these settlements they're building is illegal. And the problem is that the international community as a whole is not willing to force Israel to abide by international law.
And why is that the case? Why is the international community not willing to force Israel? Because you've just mentioned now, it is international law, but why are they not being forced to be bound by these laws?
I mean, one reason is that the United States, which is the most powerful member on the UN Security Council, although some others might say that I'm not correct, but that's is the most powerful member.
It appears to be.
It is, and probably the largest funder of the UN. The United States is very firmly on this issue on the side of one side, on the side of Israel. And so Israel believes that it can act with impunity and it's not going to be taken to task for that. So it can violate international law. It can publicly say we're building more settlements, and the United States at worst will issue a statement saying we don't agree with the building of settlements, but nothing more will happen. And this goes on not only with settlement building, but with house evictions and demolitions in Jerusalem and in other places, with every 2-year wars that Israel launches in Gaza, etc. It knows that nothing is going to happen, so it can continue doing what it wants to do.
How do we move beyond these talk shops? You've just mentioned that these talks are just going to be another talk shop. How do we move beyond them?
I don't know. This is a very difficult question because at the moment I don't see any kind of positive future on this issue. No one's willing to take Israel to task for its violations of international law. The Palestinians are extremely weak politically, militarily, diplomatically, etc. And so I think that we're going to see this kind of stalemate continue for a long time. The problem with that is that the longer it continues, the more Israel steals Palestinian land and takes over what could be a Palestinian state.
And that's a major issue. Something that I also want to look at are the sentiments of the people of, Palestine versus the people of Israel. What are the sentiments like there?
Well, Palestinians are increasingly angry, but also increasingly believe that they have been abandoned by the international community over the past couple of years, even abandoned by the Arab world, because the Arab world is much more focused on other kinds of issues that they're dealing with. And so there's that sense of abandonment, which the problem with that is that it can lead to a situation where people believe no one is on our side, so we have to do whatever needs to be done, and that could not be very pleasant consequences. On the Israeli side, of course, 20% of the Israeli population itself is Palestinians who are discriminated against. But of the other 80%, the Jewish Israelis, Jewish Israeli society and Jewish and Israeli politics has increasingly over the past 8 or 9 years been moving to the right. The Prime Minister Netanyahu, who's one of the most right-wing prime ministers they've had, has just appointed Avigdor Lieberman, and confirmed racist right-winger as the defense minister, which means that Lieberman is now going to be in charge of the occupied territories, of intelligence services and the military, which controls the West Bank and controls Palestinian areas. So I think that things are going to get much worse from that side, and there isn't in Israel a kind of strong civil society counter to the right-wing government. Society also is moving to the right. So I think that we're in for a very difficult situation.
Now, speaking of things getting either worse or maybe even better, let's look at the US specifically. I mean, you mentioned that the US is seemingly supportive of Israel, and Israel feels like, well, because we've got the protection of the US, we can pretty much do what we want. What happens if Donald Trump wins those elections in November?
That's interesting. I think, and I'm not sure that Palestinians would agree with me or Israelis would agree with me, but I think that there's more chance. There's more chance that Israel will continue to be supported as it is, or even more strongly supported, if Hillary Clinton becomes president than Donald Trump. Trump's focus is much more domestic.
Yes.
So yes, he'll want to keep Palestinians and everyone else out. Which is what he's made clear. He's
going to keep all of us out.
Keep all of us out. But he's going to be less focused on international issues, and Trump thinks like a businessman, and perhaps he is one, of course. And perhaps when he realizes how much money the United States is actually putting into Israel, and how much it's funding Israel's military budget, that might start making some kind of a difference. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case, because Trump changes his mind from day to day. Also, that the American system, the way it operates, the president actually has not entirely enough leeway to do what he or she likes. That there is a structure and a way in which things work, and that will continue. So even Trump, who is kind of on some kind of extreme, I'm not sure right-wing is the right extreme to talk about.
He's just extreme.
But he's just extreme. Yeah. Going into the White House, he'll be pulled more to the center just by the structures that operate. So I think in the old end, despite what I said, that the support for Israel will continue through Trump's presidency or Clinton's presidency. If Bernie Sanders becomes president, isn't, I think we might be looking at something different.
That's highly unlikely, though.
Some of us still hope.
Look, your analysis is very logical in terms of Donald Trump focusing more domestic. It makes a lot of sense that he wouldn't want to pump a lot of money into things that are outside of the US. It makes a lot of sense there. Perhaps to backtrack a little bit and look at where we started here. Why does Mahmoud Abbas have so much faith in South Africa, and why does he want us to be part of these discussions?
Well, South Africa is an old friend. I mean, the ANC is an old friend of the PLO, or the South African Liberation Movement are old friends of the PLO. And the South African state has been a friend of the Palestinian people. And, you know, we have a Palestinian embassy here. Not many countries in the world do. So the Palestinians believe that, and not only Abbas or the PLO or Fatah or the Palestinian Authority, but Palestinians in general, including, for example, Hamas, believe that South Africa will be on the side of the Palestinians. So I think that that's, you bring into a group of 20 countries, you ensure that a certain number are friends of yours, then you can ensure that the discussion moves in a particular direction. But there's a second thing that I think that's not being highlighted in the news, and that is that I'm pretty sure, the discussions between Abbas and Zuma were private, of course, but I'm pretty sure that the second issue that was raised in those discussions was Mahmoud Abbas being unhappy about the fact that the ANC hosted Hamas delegation and Hamas leadership last year. And I'm sure that he wanted to express that as well. This is his first opportunity to do so.
Do you think he got that opportunity, or will he use the meeting as part of that opportunity?
No, I think
to say we weren't very happy?
That's not something he's going to say in public, and so not something he'll say in Paris or when Paris happens. It's something he would have said to President Zuma directly in a private meeting that doesn't necessarily go out to the public.
Naeem, unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.